Before we begin, let me get one thing straight. What I'm sharing here isn't about my own geopolitical opinions or about picking sides or ignoring anyone's truth. My goal isn't to offend, blame, or hurt anyone. If anything, my only real intention is to break the cycle, to stop wars, to stop any form of violence, and let's be honest, even to stop those everyday arguments that divide us at the dinner table. If we can look a little deeper, maybe we can see each other differently. That's the only side I'm on. Yesterday I found myself at a spontaneous barbecue at a friend's place. You know the type. No plans, just a warm evening. The smell of charcoal. People drifting in and out with stories and half-full glasses. There, I met his neighbor. A man who, from the first handshake, radiated that peculiar kind of calm you only get from a lifetime of reading everything and believing nothing until you've checked it twice. Turns out, this wasn't just any neighbor. This was someone who had once headed the ANP, essentially the Dutch version of Reuters, or the Associated Press, the country's main news agency and nerve center of current events. After that, he moved on to become a director at Wagner, one of the largest Dutch publishers of newspapers and regional media. Not exactly your average retiree. But here's what really got me. At 65, after an entire career in journalism and media, this man decided to study history, specifically Jewish history, and later the Jewish community in Amsterdam. Not because he's religious, not because he felt any particular cultural pull, and certainly not out of apathy or sentimental sympathy, simply because something in that subject hit him right between the eyes. It was a question he couldn't shake. So he followed it. 7 years down the road, he's now a professor, on the verge of submitting his final dissertation. Not bad for someone who, by most people's standards, could have just stuck to crossword puzzles and late-night documentaries. I'll tell you why this struck me. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a history teacher. Life, and let's be honest, my own stubbornness, pushed me in a different direction. But that hunger to understand the stories beneath the surface never left. Every week, I carve out time to dig into the layers of history. The rise of the Russian Empire, the tangled relationship with Ukraine, the unrest in the Middle East, the ascent of the United States as a superpower, and of course, both world wars. These aren't just topics to me, they're obsessions. And as we stood there by the grill, swapping names and timelines and half-remembered treaties, it became clear that this neighbor and I shared something rare. We don't stop at the textbook answer, or what traditional media wants to spoon-feed us. We dive deeper. We read what's buried on the internet, and even further, into archives, memoirs, footnotes no one else bothers with. We're not just chasing facts or collecting timelines. Both of us instinctively approach every major event from at least two angles. We begin with the story as it's told here, through Western eyes with all its familiar logic, values, and official narratives. But we never stop there. Every time, whether it's World War II, the Russian Revolution, or a conflict in the Middle East, we force ourselves to dig into the other side as well. We read the German version, the Soviet perspective, the voices that schoolbooks tend to gloss over, sanitize, or flat out demonize. Why? Because we both recognize that old truth. It's always the winners who get to write the history books, never the losers. If you only ever read the victor's story, you miss half the reasons, half the pain, and, sometimes, the uncomfortable humanity on every side. We're not doing it to pick a side or hand out forgiveness. The point is to stretch your own curiosity far enough that you can, for a moment, imagine what it meant to stand on the other side of the line. Not to justify, not to judge, but simply to understand, even if that means holding two versions of the truth that don't want to sit quietly in the same room. He was one of the few people with whom I could really talk about the idea of understanding. And let's be clear, understanding here does not mean approving what, for example, the German people experienced during World War II. For most of my life, it was nearly impossible to say that out loud. But one side of the truth is, before Hitler came to power, Germany as a nation had been betrayed and humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles. After World War I, the treaty forced Germany to accept blame for the war, stripped them of territory, demanded impossible reparations, and essentially left the country broken, politically, economically, and emotionally. The sanctions that followed made daily life unbearable, and the future looked hopeless for millions. And then, along comes Hitler. In the early years, before the world had any idea what was coming, he didn't seize power with violence and fear, as I was told in my history books. He rose democratically by promising to restore dignity, purpose, and economic hope to a country that was desperate and out of options, while the rest of Europe watched and let them suffer. I've listened to some of your early speeches, translated into English, and if you put yourself in the shoes of a German at that time, after years of defeat, shame, and poverty, it's not hard to understand how so many believed he was their only way out. Let me be absolutely clear again. In my eyes, Hitler became the very embodiment of evil. Nothing can or should erase the horrors that followed. But contrary to what my schoolbook suggested, his rise was not just a matter of brute force and indoctrination. He was elected, and for a while, he looked like the solution, because nobody else was offering one. That's a part of history that rarely gets told, and even today, it's almost taboo to discuss. So why does this matter? Why is it important to understand both sides of the story to truly see through someone else's eyes, even or especially when those eyes belong to the other side? Because I believe we're living in a world that's growing more polarized by the day. East versus West, black versus white, Christian versus Muslim. The world isn't a society anymore. It's a battlefield of us or them. There's not much left of together. Like the professor, I've become convinced that nearly every conflict is a two-sided coin, with each side playing its own part. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but never nothing. Yet if we can't allow ourselves to see that both sides always have a story, a motivation, a human reason, then we lose the ability to understand anything except our own side. And that, I think, is the root of nearly every disaster we're still creating for ourselves. So before you choose a side on anything, whether it's personal, political, or global, ask yourself, are you really willing to dive into what came before? Are you willing to look at what motivated the other side, even if it's uncomfortable? Or do you stick with the standard narrative, the story in the school books, what you hear on the news, what your circle of friends repeats, or your own version of events based only on what you've lived? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Trying to understand someone, or even a nation, that made very different choices than you isn't about agreeing with them. It's not about approval. It's about giving yourself the freedom to become part of the solution, instead of staying stuck in the endless loop of blame and repetition. And what do I mean by part of the solution? Only when you try to understand all sides, you can see new possibilities, build bridges, and break the old cycles that keep the world at war, with itself or with your neighbor. Take Nelson Mandela. After 27 years in prison, including torture and humiliation, he sat down at the table with the very people who had put him there. And not long after, he became president, not because he was obsessed with his own sense of rightness, but because he understood his opponents too. Mandela didn't trade his pain for revenge. He turned his understanding, hard-earned and painfully won, into reconciliation. It's not weakness, that's power of the highest order. So next time you find yourself itching to pick a side, maybe try picking up the other side's story first. Not because it's comfortable, but because it might be the only way out of the mess we keep making, again and again. Wherever you grew up, whichever history you were taught, true understanding always begins with the courage to ask, what story did I never get to hear? And sometimes listening is the first step to healing.